What's going on, guys? My name is Arrow, and in today's video we are talking about the 3.21 Crucible launch, which is coming soon. This Thursday we are going to get patch notes, but today we're going to talk about things that I want to see buffed, I want to see nerfed, and I want to see changed in 3.21. Let's go. Alright, so 3.21. I am super excited. We saw the Crucible teaser. It looks like it's going to be a crafting mechanic of some kind, maybe. There's a forge in the video, so really hoping for a crafting mechanic. That's number one on my wish list. I really hope that there is a new way to craft items in this game, because I feel like many of the current ways of crafting are sort of uninspired, and the really strong things have been nerfed. Feels like towards the end game, you're kind of doing the exact same things on items, and then you're forced to take these annul gambles that don't feel very good. And there's not really an interesting way to create sort of mid-tier items on your way up. Outside of essence spamming fractured items, which can get very expensive for good fractures and good essences, there doesn't really seem to be a way to make that mid-tier item outside of your league start item and then moving towards your perfect endgame item. Somewhere in the middle, we've kind of lost something. During Harvest League, I feel like that was probably the pinnacle of mid-tier crafting. It was also the pinnacle of high-end crafting. It was super trivial to create mirror tier items at that point. Almost nothing was mirror tier because you could do it all yourself. But there was a way to upgrade your gear as you went, and it was so much fun to every couple levels go, you know what, let's do a reforge chaos on this wand base that I found, and see if we can hit something a little bit better than what I'm using right now. And because it wasn't too expensive to do, it was worthwhile. I think crafting is such an important part of PoE that having an interesting tiered way of crafting items, so it's always fun to craft, is really important. So I'm really hoping to see that in 3.21. Number two, nerfing some of the overperforming skills. Now I know a lot of people are, going to have their own opinions on this. I probably think that Spark should be nerfed. It feels just way too high quality of life for how much damage it does. And when you compare it to other skills, I think it should probably be brought back a little bit, and hopefully other things buffed as well to meet up with it. The more high quality of life a skill is, the less damage it needs to be valuable, right? So if you have, let's say, a totem that's doing damage for you, the damage doesn't need to be as high to be better than a self-cast spell with the exact same skill, because the damage uptime is going to be better. So skills that have higher damage uptime, like Spark, you cast and you can run around, don't need as much damage to do more damage than a similar version of the skill that doesn't have that. Number two, probably Seismic. We really would like our buddy Jung Roan to be happy, and he will not rest until Seismic Trap is nerfed. I think there's something to be said for what skills the high-end racers use. Just because not everybody competes in Gauntlet doesn't mean people don't want to watch an interesting Gauntlet. I think PoE is at its best when our racing scene is diverse and interesting, and not everybody playing Detonate Dead or whatever the skill of the moment is. And it feels like there's a small number of skills at the top, and it seems like racers are kind of split on this. But from the outside, the best races are the ones that are diverse and interesting. So if GGG could balance the skills in a way that makes that to be the case, I think everybody would be a lot happier. Number three, we'll talk about some items that I want to see adjusted. First of all, Heatshiver. Heatshiver was really interesting until we realized that it just is one of the best in slot helms for a huge majority of skills. It feels like if you're going to freeze, you got to use Heatshiver or you're wasting damage. I made 13 builds this league, and I'd say on more than half of them, people asked me why I wasn't using Heatshiver. And a lot of times they were right. I probably should have been using Heatshiver, but it's just not a super interesting item because it doesn't really require that much. Just get a lot of cold damage. Everybody's critting these days that's doing cold spells of any kind except for dots, because crit is just so easy to get. So freeze is easy to get because you automatically freeze when you crit. Therefore, any cold build that isn't damage over time wants a Heatshiver, and that just isn't that fun. It's bonus damage that you don't really have to work to get, and I just think that they could do something more interesting with Heatshiver, rework it so that it's maybe harder to freeze when you use it, but if you freeze, you get a lot of damage. or simply make it like a tier 1 rarity unique. Another item that I think needs to be adjusted is the Devouring Diadem. It's just far too strong for how easy it is to acquire. It feels just like Heatshiver, one of those items that is just mandatory to get on a huge number of builds, and it's just not that interesting. When items feel like you have to use them, or else you're simply just throwing away player power on, a vast number of builds, it's just not that much fun anymore. So I think Diadem could probably take a little bit of a nerf to its reservation efficiency. I don't think it necessarily needs to be more rare because you already have to farm the boss for it, which is a good thing, but just make it a little bit less powerful so it won't be best in slot for so many builds. A skill that I think needs to be reworked is Arcanist Brand. Arcanist Brand somehow slipped through the cracks of the curse application nerf, where GGG was trying to encourage players to self-cast, which is fine, but they forgot about Arcanist Brand. It's one of the only ways to trigger curses that doesn't nerf the damage of the curse, and it just feels mandatory to use on just about every build. There's a really interesting focus craft on helms that will cast your spells in your helmet if you focus, so once every 10 seconds or so, but that requires you to use a rare helmet. It requires you to be able to get the craft on the helmet and use your gems there. So there's opportunity cost, but with Arcanist Brand, it's just put things on Arcanist Brand and they cast. So I'm hoping / expecting that Arcanist Brand gets a similar nerf the way that Curse on Hit got nerfed down to level 1 gems. I imagine there's going to be like a 30% penalty on Arcanist Brand if you use it to cast curses, and it probably should be. But that said, Arcanist Brand could be interesting as an offensive skill, but the damage penalty on it for regular spells is way too high, so no one will ever use it for that. So I'm concerned if they do nerf Arcanist Brand, it'll just never get used, and I think that's a shame. So maybe lower the damage nerf for regular spells and give it one for curses. That's enough talk about nerfs. Let's talk about buffs. What do I want to see buffed? Mana. We have been waiting for this for quite a long time. GGG said a couple of patches ago that they intended to buff mana, and then last league they gave us a mana buff. It was 10% more Mind Over Matter, which is nice, but it's not enough. The real problem with Mind Over Matter is recovery, and currently the only way to play it really effectively is to use Leech on an attack. I know there are other builds out there that use mana, but as an archetype, mana is generally struggling from recovery. I think we need to get new ways to recover mana and bring back that really, really fun mana life hybrid archetype that we enjoyed so many leagues ago. Number 2, Gladiator. Gladiator is an absolute dumpster of an ascendancy right now. I tried theory crafting with it a bunch this league, and getting block is cool, but there's so much block in the game that you can get without playing Gladiator that it just doesn't really feel necessary. And outside of Explode from Bleed, Gladiator doesn't really do anything for us. I'd love for the block archetype to really be leaned into in Gladiator. Maybe give us some recovery on block, things like that. The things that actually make block powerful. But please, please, fix Gladiator. It's so boring. Speaking of Gladiator, another thing that I would like to see changed and buffed in 3.21 is Fizz Dot. Not just Bleed, but any sort of physical damage over time. Things like Exsanguinate and Reap. Those skills are really, really good for hit, but the Fizz Dot is just so hard to scale, it's simply not worth it. So nobody uses those Fizz Dot skills for their physical damage over time. Give us some more scaling for physical damage over time on the bottom of the tree, and Fizz Dot can once again become a relevant playstyle, but it currently just isn't in a good place. One of the most important things that I want to see fixed in 3.21 is bows. Bows right now are essentially relegated to Magic Find builds and 5 mirror tornado shot builds. You can also use them with ballistas, which is a fun archetype, but it's not really bows. And it feels like any skill that you use a bow with, you also have to use like a focus ballista or something in order to do damage. I miss the days of bow skills actually just being powerful, but the problem is the game has simply left them behind. Bows are in a bad state as far as their base damage. It is incredibly difficult to get a strong bow, and if you do come across 50 to 100 divines, you can get a powerful bow. The skill still doesn't feel that good to play. Bow builds tend to be on the bottom right of the tree, they tend to be squishier, and that's fine if they do a lot of damage. A glass cannon that doesn't do damage is just glass. So I'd love to see a bow rework, give us stronger bows, rework the uniques so they're actually powerful, not just a little bit of a buff to their base damage, and buff the skills. Add base damage to the skills of bows so that gem levels is actually useful. A side note of bows, delete the bow spellcaster archetype. It's incredibly boring that one of the best ways to play a spell is with a bow with gem levels and a quiver, and then casting with a bow. It doesn't make any sense. I don't think I've ever talked to someone who thinks it's a cool idea to use a bow with a spell, but I know a lot of people who play it because it's really, really strong. Just get rid of it. Give us better options on staves and wands and scepters. Don't force people into playing bows because it's the only way to get an offhand for a spellcaster. Now, you could solve this by giving, say, stave users an offhand of some kind, like a backpack that gives you some stats. I don't know what the exact solution is here, but the bow spellcaster archetype is boring. Get rid of it. Another thing I'd really, really like to see reworked is more uniques. I think the unique rework that GGG did going into this league was fantastic. A lot of the uniques missed the mark, and most of them are still not useful, but a ton of them are useful. I would like to see another 50 to 100 uniques buffed, changed, reworked, even if you just give small numerical buffs to some of the underused uniques that have interesting interactions already. I think you could do a lot for the state of the game right now. As a content creator, you guys know that I love making new, interesting, unique builds, and when GGG provides the tools to do that, such as good crafting and good uniques, I can make a lot more interesting stuff, and so can you. Another thing I'm really hoping for in this 3.21 patch is new skills. Been a while since we got some new skills. We haven't gotten too many when they were given to us. We got some things like Link skills. We got Alchemist Mark. And then we got some really cool things like Frozen Legion. I had a lot of fun with that this league. But we need some new skills or rework old skills. I tried to make a build with Reeve this league, and it's one of the more interesting of the true melee skills that's just slash an area in front of you. And it still just isn't that good. It's just not that interesting. You have to stand still in melee. It's just simply not that good. Please, buff some of the underused skills. Lastly, I want to work in this cool idea that was brought to me by my chat, creating a pinpoint support for bow skills. So right now, spells have access to a support gem called Pinpoint, which removes projectiles and gives you more damage as you stand still and cast. This is incredibly powerful, and actually it's really underused for skills that use a lot of projectiles. If bows had something like that, it wouldn't feel so mandatory to go get another 6-link that has a focus ballista or a barrage setup, which I think is kind of a boring playstyle, kind of a boring archetype to be forced into, where you always have a single target setup. I'd like the option to have a single target / mapping build. All right, so that's gonna do it for me. I hope you guys enjoyed my list. If you have any thoughts, disagree or agree, let me know down in the comments below. Check out my Patreon if you want to support me. You can like and subscribe this video. I have so much content planned for 3.21. I'm going to have my league starter coming out as soon as patch notes are done. We're going to get to work on that. And don't forget to check me out on Twitch, twitch.tv/AER0__. I am live almost every single day. We are going to be streaming the patch notes on Thursday. So make sure you come and hang out and get your wings over there from GGG and get in the hype waiting room. So thank you so much for watching. And as always, take care.